Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Hey, welcome to another edition of American Potential. Thanks for joining us. Always trying to bring you stories of people breaking barriers, particularly government-imposed barriers. And we have a great one for you today. You know, because of COVID and people being at home more, in 2020, people started taking up more hobbies. And some people just kept those things as a hobby, but others turned their love for cooking or arts and crafts into a business. And today's podcast guest is one of those people who turned her new skill of baking sourdough bread into a porch pickup business. But because she's a cottage food baker, she had some limitations put on her business. Now, Jenny Berg owns Crumb Sourdough Micro Bakery, which is located in the state of Oregon. And this year, Oregon passed a bill that will now allow her micro bakery to grow and have her sourdough creations introduced to a much wider audience. Jenny Berg is our guest on today's episode, and she's going to talk about her micro bakery as well as the work she did to help get this bill passed. Jenny, thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here and speak with you today.
So, first and foremost, I always try and get a kind of a fun fact about folks, and I'm pretty anxious to hear this one because I don't know really the question to ask. All it says is the Legends of the West stamp story. So I got to hear that first and foremost.
Sure. Well, had this story gone a different direction, I probably wouldn't be sitting with you here today.
Okay.
Is how profound this is. Back in 1994, the U.S. Postal Service released a new stamp series called Legends of the West, and it featured 20 heroes of the West, famous cowboys, like Kit Kodak and rodeo cowboys and so forth. I think there was even maybe Annie Oakley on there. And this was right around Christmas time. And I went into the post office here in Bend, and they, present you with the new stamp releases. And I was drawn to this Legends of the West. So I bought 4 sheets of these stamps. And back then they were the lickable kind of stamps, which is that's an important fact to remember here in this story.
Got it.
So I was going to use these stamps on my Christmas cards and that kind of stuff. So I get home, I put my stamps away in my little office there. And one of the images on the stamps, which was quite unusual, happened to be a black cowboy, and his name was Bill Pickett. And he was very famous in the rodeo scene. And actually invented steer wrestling. I mean, he's like in the Hall of Fame of cowboys. And so I thought that was intriguing because, you don't see a black cowboy very often. Right. So I put my stamps away, and about 2 days later, I go into my office and I see on the floor all of my stamps chewed up into tiny little pieces.
Uh-oh.
Well, my cat had an affinity for chewing paper, and especially I think she loved the stamps with the lickable flavor on the back.
Sure.
So she ate all my stamps.
Oh no.
So about, I guess it was maybe 2 weeks after that, I go get it was the Oregonian newspaper at the time off the driveway, a Sunday paper. And I sit down and I open it up, and on the front page is a headline story about how the Postal Service screwed up the picture of Bill Pickett. And it's the first time in 147 years that the Postal Service had put the wrong image on a stamp.
Whoa.
And all of a sudden, and Bend was the only town at the time they thought had sold any stamps prematurely by accident. Goodness. And I paid cash. They couldn't track me. The government was scrambling to get these stamps back. Uh-huh. They were going to destroy them. Yes. And, but they couldn't find me, obviously. Well, anyway, long story short, these stamps were purportedly going at auction for $1 million. I had 3 or 4 of them. I bought that many sheets. I can't remember
wow.
exactly how many.
Oh my goodness.
And my cat ate them.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah. And so that I literally thought I was going to have an aneurysm when I saw it.
Yeah, I would imagine. That's an amazing story.
It is. So anyway, yeah.
I mean, that cat, I'm telling you, you must have loved that cat to let it survive that story, right?
I was pretty ticked. Yeah, I was ticked at her for a little while, but it was just meant to be. It was just one of those things where I thought, you know what? Here I had like $3 million in my office and in a very rare stamp.
That is crazy.
So that was a pretty wild story. It's a fun story to tell at parties, you know?
Yeah. So you didn't even send one of those stamps. Like you didn't even lick one and send it to someone else. You just.
That's interesting. I did use a few of them and I couldn't recall if I had used the Bill Pickett stamp.
Right.
So I called some relatives and of course they were like, I don't know. I threw that envelope away. Good luck.
Wow.
But, yeah. And
what
I think
story.
eventually the Postal Service ended up not destroying them after all. And they resold them to the public at just over face value.
Yeah.
And so they weren't eventually going to go for $1 million. They were more like in the several $1,000s mark.
Well, still though, I mean, you know, I wouldn't be happy if my cat ate several $1,000s worth of, you know, $100 bills or whatever. So
it was pretty amazing. I just thought, you know, I guess was not my path.
Yeah. What a great story. That's a great story. Yeah, thanks for sharing it with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, listen, tell us a little bit about your bakery, first of all.
Well, sure. Yeah. So during the pandemic, you were right. I was sent home from my full-time job. And I saw a friend of mine post on social media. She had just made her first sourdough bread. And sourdough was something I was always had been intrigued by. So I reached out to her. And, you know, it's pretty intimidating, though. I think anybody you ask who's contemplated getting into it, it's, you know, there's a big responsibility. It's you got to keep the starter alive and feed it. And I mean, can you go on vacation? What do you do? Do you bring it with you? I mean, it's like having a living being.
Yes. And it's like having a cat. It's like having a cat.
Exactly. Yeah. Except it won't eat your stamps, but it'll get you in other ways.
That's right.
You know, you don't want to go into sourdough lightly, really. And, anyway, she gave me encouragement. She made it sound pretty doable. And I ended up purchasing dried sourdough through believe it or not, a sourdough archiver in San Francisco. So this particular variety was a 150-year-old dried sourdough starter out of San Francisco. So that was where the journey began. And I just started playing around with it and reading as much as I could, finding influencers and bakers and buying sourdough books and learning. And about a year later, after giving a lot of the bread away and eating it ourselves, I just was getting a lot of positive feedback from coworkers and friends. And I thought, you know, why not? Why not just try seeing if I can sell this? And was where the idea to start the business started. That was actually in February of 2021. So it had been almost a whole year of just sort of like messing around with baking it. And boy, was there a learning curve with it. But I got to a point where I felt comfortable, like I could ask money for this.
Right.
So I started the business, and that's when I discovered how restrictive Oregon food laws are for what I was looking to do. Yeah.
What did you do before you started baking sourdough bread? Before 2020, what did you do?
Well, before 2020, my husband retired and I sort of retired with him. We moved to Arizona. But prior to that, I've been in publishing. I've been an editor for a local magazine here in town. That was years ago. When I was laid off, I was working at an appliance store here in town. And we were actually considered essential during the pandemic. So I was able to do some part-time work from home and maintain employment there. Right. Gosh, I've done web design. I actually in the 90s, I made jam and sold my jams and jellies at Saturday markets and craft shows around here. So I guess I've always had kind of a little entrepreneurial bug in me to, kind of branch out and do something on my own and be totally responsible for myself.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So you opened this bakery, and what were some of the regulations that you faced that kind of limited what you could do?
Sure. Well, here in Oregon, there are basically two directions you can go as a home baker. One is become completely licensed and under the scrutiny of the Department of Agriculture, and they come and inspect your kitchen, and your kitchen has to be up to certain standards. And that would have been great for me, but for the fact we have pets. Actually, a new cat now. And two
Got
dogs.
rid of the old one, did you?
Yeah. We won't say how that happened.
Oh, no, let's not.
Just kidding. No, she lived a nice long life.
Okay.
So as a domestic kitchen baker, licensed here in Oregon, you cannot have pets. So to my delight, though, we had something passed in 2016 called the home baking exemption law, or the cottage food law, where it was still pretty vague if you could have pets in your home. It didn't say you couldn't, and it didn't say you could. So I erred on the side of that I could. And it was a very loose law, but pretty restrictive at the same time. So I just went that direction. And I'm not inspected by the Department of Agriculture. And I have pets, obviously, in the home. And per the law, I'm restricted to selling in certain venues and how I sell and how much. So it was kind of a trade-off, either get rid of the pets and get licensed, which wasn't going to happen.
Right.
Or, settle for really like this would just be a hobby with a little bit of income, which sort of was not a great deal for me. And that was frustrating.
Yeah.
So that got the wheels going on how can this change?
Right. And there were restrictions on how much you could make, right, off of the bakery as well.
Yes. Oregon currently, until the new law goes into effect, we are tied with another state as having the lowest sales cap, which is $20,000 gross sales. That's before expenses.
Wow.
That's not even a poverty wage after you pay your taxes, buy your equipment and your supplies and everything. So that was rough, $20,000 sales cap.
Right.
And then, so other restrictions are, we can't engage in wholesale. We can't ship our products. And a big one is not engaging in e-commerce or having a shopping cart on my website.
Wow.
I mean, none of this has anything to do with food safety.
No.
It's just very arbitrary to kind of keep it, very, unappealing.
Yeah. Well, and
to get into.
It's really protectionism, right? Government sponsored protectionism. It's protecting big grocery stores and others from, mom and pop shops and those who want to do home baked goods too. So
definitely.
Yeah. So Oregon had a law. Let's talk about that, or has recently passed this Senate Bill 643. Talk about that. How did you find out that there was legislator working on this this issue and this SB 643?
Sure. Well, there were no legislators working on this issue. So you're looking at it. I asked my husband, I think I had like a semester of political science in high school. And I said, how does a new law, how do you get a bill to become a law? Right? Isn't there like a song, a poem that kids recite?
Right.
How a bill becomes a law. And it was just it was fortuitous. About the same time, there's a gentleman by the name of David Crable who runs another podcast and a website called Forager. And he's kind of the cottage food guru for the entire country.
Okay.
And in a newsletter I received from him, it talked about California having reformed drastically their cottage food laws. And there were some great resources in there, including two organizations, the Cook Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization that wants to legalize homemade food and have food freedom. And then there's the Institute for Justice, which is another nonprofit public law firm. And they they went to battle for Californians. And so I just reached out to those two agencies, connected with the people there, and they set me on the path. I started gathering a coalition of other Oregon cottage food operators. We created a closed group on Facebook, and we just started emailing legislators. And we heard back from many of them, but one in particular stepped up to the plate, Senator Tim Knopp, and said, I will sponsor your bill. I believe in what you're doing. And my father was a baker, and I support small business. So he was our champion. And so with his help and the Institute for Justice and other cottage food operators, we, over the course of the year, just went to work on getting this law changed. And we told the Institute for Justice what the things we wanted to see changed. And they put that into language into the bill and worked with the senator's staff. And it was a great learning experience. But they did a lot of the foot soldier work on.
Right. Well, I love this story because it's such a great example of, you were a person who, you weren't a lobbyist. You didn't have really any background in how to get government to, pass a law, or you just were an average, ordinary person, right? Who came across this and said, well, this affects me, but it's also affecting other people in Oregon. And that's what I always love about stories we tell on this podcast, is that it's people who are willing to step up, but they don't do it just for themselves. They do it for themselves, but they also correct it for, everybody else who is facing that same issue in that same state or community. And that's what's just such a great story, is that you went and did this, and it's a success story. You got the law changed and affected change, and you just were an average, everyday, ordinary citizen. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it just goes to show you that if you can connect with the right people and you have that inherent desire to, want to roll up your sleeves and make a change. If you're not happy with something in the legal system in your state or your jurisdiction, we're not helpless. There are people out there to team up with you and help you to make a change. Or you can educate yourself, and I'm sure do it on your own too. Now that I know what I know, I wanted to introduce some new bill. I kind of know the procedure now.
Right.
It's not so scary. And it was fascinating to see how, our government, our state government works, and attending the hearings virtually and just being proactive. And there's a lot of pride in that as well. And yes, and just seeing the community of other bakers in our state and reading the testimony that they submitted throughout is so moving. It brings you to tears to hear these personal stories of why these people started a cottage food operation and why they can't do something more, get licensed so this was their option. And we want to give everybody that opportunity that America, promises that we can do as business people, self-employed business people.
Yeah. And you really built a community around this. As you mentioned, you use social media and other ways to kind of build a community around this, which is great. Now, you went and testified. This was your first time ever testifying, I assume. How did you feel as you were going in? I imagine you had a little bit of nerves.
Yeah, there were some nerves for sure. Wonderfully, though, I didn't have to leave my house. I didn't have to go to Salem. Yeah. Everything was virtual.
Right.
So, they could see my face, the committees. I was probably on some, jumbotron in their office or something in their room. But yeah, so I was nervous, but I was prepared. And I think when you are passionate enough about something and enough about your subject, the nerves just sort of melt away.
Sure.
What you're advocating for becomes bigger than your fear on, speaking or public speaking.
No, your cat didn't come eat your notes or anything, right? Before, no?
No. No, our new cat vomits. We call her the serial puker, but other than that, no.
Oh,
Doesn't eat
boy.
anything. Yeah.
Well, that's
No.
good. That's good.
Good cat overall. Yeah.
Improvement.
There, yes.
So other than testifying, I assume you also had to talk to lawmakers, right?
Yes. So we had Zoom meetings with Senator Knopp, wrote a lot of emails to all of the committee members, both in the Senate and the House. So there was a lot of legwork, and sometimes it was like, the Institute for Justice would say, "All right, got to get this email going," and overnight we had to become activists. We all were sort of on call. And so the beauty of the Facebook group is you can rally everybody in an instant. And the feedback is the legislators received hundreds of emails, not only from us, but we recruited our customers as well, and got a lot of support from our customers who love what we're all doing and don't want to see us go away and want to see us flourish. Yeah.
And that's often a great point. People think that this is, they hear about a story like this and they think it's a person and there's just a few people who are impacted, people who want to bake at home or, have a home baking business or whatever. But it isn't. It's all the customers that enjoy their product who are being denied that product when you've got a bill that's limiting, or when you've got a law that's limiting their ability to produce this product. It's really stopping consumers from having that choice as well. And that's a real important part of this story too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the presumption is with these restrictions that are, again, have no bearing on food safety and we're talking shelf stable foods. We're not allowed to sell things that require temperature control. There's really nothing that goes bad with shelf stable. It just goes stale. So the restrictions in the law are presuming that consumers are kind of in some way, stupid and can't make an informed decision. They know I baked it here in my house. They can read my labeling. I'm required to have specific language on my label that I'm not in a licensed kitchen. This is a homemade product. I'm not inspected. So you take it or not. I mean, leave it up to the customers and the consumer to make that decision, not government.
Yeah. That's exactly right. So now that this bill is passed, I know you can't speak for everyone out there, but I'm sure they have several or very similar stories. But how will this bill help your business grow?
It's going to be wonderful for so many reasons. The income cap or the sales cap's been raised to $50,000. We asked for unlimited, like a lot of other states currently have. Right. I think 33 other states have unlimited sales.
Wow.
But we had enough opposition that the committee decided, well, we better still have a cap. So it's 50,000, which is better.
Yeah.
But the big point for me, and I don't know about other bakers, but the pet allowance is now, whether you're licensed domestic kitchen baker or a cottage food operator, we can all have pets in the home now, just not in the food preparation area. So I think a lot of us now are going to then take that step and become licensed. And then we have no restriction on income. We'll be inspected, but we will have greater opportunity for wholesale avenues. Sure. We can sell in many different venues. I mean, we're a lot less restricted. Yes, we will be inspected and that kind of thing, but that's just so now cottage food is a great stepping stone to become licensed. And I think the state is excited about that because that's more money for them when we have to get a license.
Right. And were all the internet, website things removed, all of those kinds of things? Can you advertise on a website now?
We can. I can have a shopping cart. This is all effective in 2024. I'll be able to have a real shopping cart on my website. I can sell wholesale to retail stores and coffee shops, but not restaurants. And we can, instead of we're required now to have our home addresses on our labeling, which is a safety risk. There have been incidents in other states of some rape and just unsavory things with having our home address on the label. We can now replace that with a unique ID. And then we can all have pets in the home. We have to state on the labeling that there could be a pet allergen. because there are pets in the home. So again, just more kind of labeling, disclosure.
Yeah.
And the ID number will be traceable if there is ever a problem with foodborne illness. But again, with shelf-stable foods, there's not really any significant incidents of foodborne illness across the country, across the board. Right. It's really hard to get sick on cookies and bread.
Yeah, right. Well, I don't know. I can get pretty sick on cookies, but it's just from eating too many of them. But, what can I say?
I hear you.
Yeah. So Jenny, I know I don't want to talk necessarily specifically about Oregon, but this is a great story in that, you saw this issue, decided to take it up. And so many people just, say, oh, well, the government won't let me do it. And so they give up and they go do something else. And I guess I would just ask you to encourage other people, maybe in other states or other places, why this is so important when you see something like this to take action, go out and do it, because you really, truly, you didn't just help yourself, you helped, lots of other people in your state. Why is that important to want to be involved and to make change like this?
Well, yeah, I think I've heard from so many people all around the country through my Instagram account where I'm promoting, keeping everybody apprised of what's going on in Oregon. And I got a lot of inquiries, a gal in Georgia, kind of frustrated with their sales cap. It's important to know that it's doable. And, our state governments work for us. And so, yes, you don't have to move a mountain to try to get something done. It may not happen in the year you are working towards new law reform. I kept getting told, be patient. This could be a years-long process. So don't give up. Start the ball rolling. Connect with the right people that will help you and guide you and teach you. Yes, they're going to empower you, or they're not going to do the work for you. But just to know that it is definitely doable to get law reform. And it's important because it creates, economic strength in the communities. If the less restrictions that we can have on small business has such a ripple effect in your community and your state. It's empowering. Mostly cottage food operators are women of modest income and children at home. And so it's female empowering. There are a lot of men who are, do coffee roasting, and they're allowed to do their cottage food sales now under our new reform. So it's just opened the doors wide open. And I just think you're going to see communities and consumers thriving under less restriction, letting people make their own decisions on what they're going to be ingesting, and support the local farmers and the home bakers. We call them hyper local, creating food for communities, and consumers love it. I have people that won't buy sourdough bread anywhere else than from me. They can eat sourdough for the first time where they've been either gluten intolerant or completely, what's the glycemic, or excuse me, the disease, celiac disease.
Oh, celiac,
excuse me.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Excuse me. So I do have a couple of celiac customers who can finally eat bread. So it's just a win-win for everybody to have less restriction, to, step up. And I, again, don't think you can do it on your own. There are people out there that can help guide you through the whole process.
Now, you don't, because this bill goes into effect in 2024, you may not have a website yet. Do you have a website where people can learn more about your business or not?
Yes, I've always had a website.
Well, let us know. What's that?
Okay.
What's that address?
It is crumbsourdoughmicrobakery.com.
CRUMB, right?
Yes. CRUMB.
Great.
Crumb is actually the pattern and the size of the holes inside of sourdough.
Oh, okay.
By the way, it's actually a technical term. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, great.
It's not just the crumb falling off your bread. So
well, awesome.
Yeah, so people can go there, and in 2024, I'll be able to ship. We're looking at seeing if that's going to be interstate or just within Oregon, or that's still up in the air. But yeah, it's going to really open up some more doors for all of us. As
I told you before we started the interview, I love sourdough bread. It's like my favorite. bread that there is. So I'm going to hit your website, and I'm going to have to wait till 2024. And if you can't ship outside of Oregon, I may have to come to Oregon and get some of your sourdough bread. But I will make sure that I have some at some point.
Oh, I would love to, and I will even give it to you for free. How's that?
Well, we'll see. We'll see about that. I'd love to support your business. So, okay, good tip. Well, you get a good tip. That sounds great. Jenny, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Jeff. It's been a pleasure, and I have enjoyed the entire process and sharing what's going on in Oregon. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. And listen, if you're listening to this story, this is a great example of how you can get involved. And like I said, I just love stories like this where ordinary citizens just say, you know what, I'm going to do this. It isn't as hard as you think to get involved. And as Jenny mentioned, she had a state legislator who took up the cause for her. Many of these state legislators, they want to pass good legislation, and they're waiting to hear from you. So you've got to be able to do that, organize a community, get in a grassroots way, and get legislation passed. So if you have a great story like Jenny's, we'd love to hear it. You can send me an email at jeff@americanpotential.com. You can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube at American Potential. And just want to really thank you for joining us on this episode and listening to another episode of American Potential.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.